Hit us with the record, Mad Tings blood, one extra, Mad Tings, bruv. That's just a little joke, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Strictly Fighters podcast. I am Jason Madewell, your host. Gentle brothers, how are we doing? Are we well?
Yeah, it's another solid start. Blessed.
Before we get cracking, I want to show you guys something. I've got a little summing here. None other than Proper 12.
Yeah,
Triple distilled, notorious Irish whiskey. Did you hear that cork pop?
Stella.
Sean coming in with the class.
Sponsored by.
That's a
Folks,
stiff one.
as Craig says, that's how we get demonetized. All right, and if you're watching the YouTube version, you can see the glass. It's got the name on it. Right, boys.
So who do you think Jason's favorite fighter is? Just a shot in the dark.
He has worn Notorious's shirt the last two podcasts.
Yeah. Thank
How
God
do you
he's
figure?
upgraded from that. Jeez, like.
Right, let's get into it, boys. Fight night, Rozenstruik versus Gane. Cyril Ramaphosa Gane versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Gane winning by unanimous decision, completely outstruck Rozenstruik. Bit of a boring fight. We even had Dana White in the post-fight presser giving him a little bit of shit about the average nature of his performance. What do we think about that, right? What do we think about when people say that fighters are boring or they didn't deserve the win or they fought boring to get the win? Is there merit in that?
Yeah, absolutely. If same thing in jiu-jitsu, dude. You've got guys who would fight for points and you've got guys who would fight for the submission. There's nothing more convincing than winning a fight by submission. There's nothing more convincing than winning a fight by knockouts or, again, submission. I mean, if you have two people at the same sort of skill level, it makes sense that you're going to have a fight that's going to come down to a decision. But there was no... Gane was absolutely, obviously much better than Rozenstruik on the night. He was quicker. He was in and out. That jab was insane. But come on, dude, what a boring match. I had to have 2 cups of coffee.
No, but here's the point. Here's my point is, can he be faulted for the way that he achieved the victory? There's been many instances in the past in the UFC and other promotions and fights in general of people doing just enough to get the W. So if you fight what others consider or what the spectators might consider a boring fight, but you stick to a game plan and you get the W, at the end of the day, from a fighter's perspective, that's all that matters, right? If you're, your win bonus, that's is being flashy and potentially getting caught and doing something wrong. Is that going to get you your win bonus? Is that going to move you up in your rankings in your division? Where does the balance lie?
Dude, honestly, if fighting is a spectator sport, no one's gonna, unless they've got a beef with someone else or unless they're training to get better, you're fighting for the audience. And if you're only in there to last out the 5 rounds and hopefully win it on points, that's not a fight anyone's going to want to watch. I granted, there's strategy involved. They're not going to put themselves at risk. They're not going to move into striking distance and out of striking distance or into striking distance unnecessarily, especially not with someone like Rozenstruik who could take you out with one punch. So I think Gane was being a bit more cautious there. And we've seen it before with Ngannou and I think it was the Black Beast. That was also, again, one of the most boring fights to watch because it's 2 very big people who just are too scared to get within striking range. Or I don't understand it though, because Gane is just so much better.
But would you say it's scared, or do you think they like
cautious?
That post you put up the other day, Jay, from Tyson, where it's fighting is a clever man's sport. So
thinking man's sport.
So do you think they just matched each other from a tactical and mind games perspective, where they just neither of them could get in and out, and that makes the fight boring?
Well, let's take a great example. Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero. Everyone thought it was going to be an absolute cracker. Everyone was looking forward to it. One of the most violent people that's ever existed versus, one of the top strikers. And it was a complete and utter flop, right? Everyone had a go at Adesanya and at Romero for that matter, saying that they never engaged, they never kind of went at it. But in my mind, Israel did exactly what he needed to do to win the fight. He had a plan, he had a strategy he knew would work for him. He stuck to it. Yo didn't want to engage, Yo didn't want to wrestle, and Izzy got the W. In my mind, that's a clever fight. Yes, maybe he lost some points, some street cred or some points in some spectators' minds, but you could forgive him for something like that because everyone knows that traditionally and consistently he is a very exciting fighter.
Yeah, and same can be said for Gane and Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik has knocked people out from nowhere. Gane is, I mean, he's undefeated at the moment, and he's good at submissions and knockouts. So they're both extremely exciting fighters. But I think it is a case of getting two people together that they understand each other's skill sets. They understand the danger when it comes to getting too close to each other. Maybe that's just one of those fights. I mean, Gane isn't that boring in his other fights, so we can't just say that he's a boring fighter. It wouldn't be fair to say that, but it was a boring fight. I mean, I would rather have been doing something else.
Yeah, as a fan of the sport, it's difficult being up at 4 a.m. and being like, this is a struggle to watch.
Yeah,
fair enough. If you look at their physiques, Gane is a bit of a beast, isn't he? He's super ripped. He's big. Aesthetically, he's a specimen of sort. And then you've got Jairzinho, who is, for lack of a better word, doughy. I'm glad Jairzinho lost. I don't like the guy, but anyway, what I want to use this to move into is that sometimes a big, ripped, aesthetic physique doesn't always translate into fighting strength, or at least fighting prowess, when you're fighting in against fighters who are at the same weight as you, right? And that brings me to a point where I want to discuss functional training versus weightlifting in MMA, or in martial arts in general for that matter, right? So if we think about functional strength, what is functional strength? The definition I have here is training the body to successfully perform the daily activities of life, or a particular activity more efficiently and without injuries. So if we get a little bit more granular and translate that into training for a sport, right? Functional training and functional strength is training specifically to improve your physical capabilities in the sport that you have chosen, or in a sport that you're competing in. And functional training would be exercises that involve multiple muscle groups. So it's compound movements, things like squats, things like pull-ups, things like deadlifts, things like Olympic lifting, using weights or body weights or kettlebells or things like battle ropes, right? Whereas traditional training is more traditional strength and weightlifting. It's things that focuses on isolating certain muscles and muscle groups, either to build and grow them, to build muscle mass, and then attacking them from different angles to cut them from a more aesthetic perspective. Things like bicep curls, things like shoulder press, things like calf raises, right? Now, my argument, and it's a personal one that I'll take you through real quick before we get your views on the matter, is that functional training and functional strength is way more, it's way more beneficial for martial artists than being in the gym and doing traditional weightlifting. I'll tell you why I think that. I feel like the fact that it primes the body to be able to simulate or mimic actual fighting situations in the specific martial art that you've chosen, right? It builds neuroplasticity. It builds new neural pathways for your body. It's muscle memory.
Yeah, it's
That's
muscle
exactly
memory
what
that you're building into your body, 100%. But to say that traditional training doesn't have muscle memory is a tough one to go with, because you put Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the gym and the man's going to bench a hell of a lot more than any of us.
Yes, and you put Arnold Schwarzenegger in an octagon and he's going to get absolutely fucking raped. He's going to get knocked out.
Yeah, but
he's not going to stand a chance.
None of those guys pride themselves on being able to get into a ring and absolutely knock someone the
But
fuck
that's
out.
what I'm saying, right? That's where functional strength has a massive advantage over weight training. I think weight training plays a very important role in your physical makeup as a fighter.
Heated, yeah?
Let's go. Let's go.
You-
Let me
you-
let me
you-
let
you
me let me
say-
put
No. You say that it's more, it's far
proper
more
12 liquid gold.
You say it's far more beneficial. Yes, if that's what you're looking for. Beneficial if you're a fighter, yes.
We're
If
talking
you,
about fighting.
That's
yeah,
what I'm
but
talking
yeah,
about.
but
This is the
yeah, but-
context I want to use.
Yeah, but that's if you're aiming at a specific target. You cannot say to me that Arnold Schwarzenegger training functional training is going to be best for him to become Mr. Olympia. It's just
No,
not going
but
to be
if
a
you
thing.
listen, Craig, if you listen to me,
I don't
if
like
you listen
listening
to me,
you.
in the beginning of this monologue,
This
I
beninging.
said in the beninging,
In the beginning,
in the beninging, I said that in an MMA context or for training MMA, functional strength is beneficial and has more advantages.
Yes.
Now, I have a personal example to share with you. I've been training in the gym since I was 17 years old, right? I like to
And
look
how's
good.
that going for you?
Yeah. We'll get into that. Actually, that's the second part of what I want to talk about. But so I've done strength training, I've done weightlifting for the last 13 years of my life, and to varying degrees of success. And I'm a very injury prone human being, which we'll touch on in a little while. But even when I trained in karate and the other different martial arts that I trained in, I was lifting weights. And now only recently, when I started training boxing, I started training in functional strength because of the gym that I go to. That's what they prioritize. And I can genuinely feel a massive difference in my body and my ability to engage in the martial art that I've chosen. What we do is a lot of high intensity interval training, right? And basically what that is again mimicking fighting, where you train in very short and intense bursts, and then you have a short rest, and then you carry on in those intense bursts. And one of the biggest things that I've seen that affect is my fast twitch muscle fibers and my ability to be explosive in the ring, right? My ability to translate the explosiveness that I train in, because the movements and the weights and the biomechanics and everything around it mimic the way that I move and the way that I should move in a ring. And the other thing is, which is weirdly enough and quite interesting, is how it affects my aerobic ability and my aerobic performance. So to put that into context, I used to run. I've also ran my whole life. And for the last probably 5 to 6 years, I've struggled to do a sub 25-minute 5K, which basically means you're running a kilometer in under 5 minutes for 5Ks. I went back to training in January. I trained for 6 weeks, and I was able to absolutely smash a sub 25-minute 5K. And that was without running. I didn't run before that. I didn't run to gradually build myself up to doing that time, to smashing that time. It was all high intensity interval training. It was all anaerobic exercise that completely evolved my aerobic ability, which is pretty cool. Now, Craig, to bring you in here, you're weightlifting, right? You're in the gym at the moment.
Well, I'm a combination of both. I love high interval training purely because of exactly what you've said. There is the reason you can do a sub 25 is a big part of running is breathing, and HIIT intervals stretches your lungs. It expands everything and drives as much oxygen as humanly possible to your lungs. And it develops that to be able to use it for cardiovascular exercises. So I use that as a form of fitness, but then yes, to a certain extent, I go for the aesthetic point of view. So I definitely am into the weightlifting part.
But so this is my point: is while I don't see a massive difference aesthetically in terms of changes in my body in the last 2 full months that I've been training, I can feel a massive difference in my strength, in my fitness, in my flexibility, and especially when I get in the ring. And the other upside of functional training is that it is a big injury reducer, because it primes your body, because it trains you muscle memory for the art or the sport that you're training in. It helps to prevent and reduce injuries. So that's something that I want to move.
Would you say you're currently injured?
Yes. So counterintuitively, it's actually what I want to lead into.
Okay.
But before we get into that,
we don't have Sean's
before we
take
get
here.
into that, that's what I want to bring him in.
Okay, so strength is, we need to look at two different things. Yeah, so one is the functional training, like you were talking about, and that's what most martial arts are going to do, because it benefits almost every aspect of your game. You're more limber, you're more strong in certain positions, because like you said, a bench press, very rarely are you going to be in a situation where you need to bench press someone off yourself. In fact, if you're a good grappler, you're not bench pressing at all. So that exercise in the gym is a pretty useless exercise to do. However, I train with a lot of guys who do those sorts of static exercises, like deadlifts, like bench pressing, but with a very specific goal in mind. It's to strengthen that area of their body that they need to strengthen. And it's not something they would do exclusively. It's something they would do in addition to all of the other high intensity interval trainings, any of the other sort of calisthenics types training, to make sure that you're functionally functional. So yeah, some guys will go in and they will target certain muscle groups if they're focusing on it. But more often than not, you're going to be dealing with guys who are doing functional strength. And I mean, there's definitely argument for the fact that you don't want to build too much muscle. I mean, someone like Gane, he might benefit from it in heavyweights, because everyone else is that size. If they're not that size in terms of muscle, they've got some blubber on them. They're all pretty much that big. So it benefits him to also have that size on him. Again, whether or not size helps, go back to last week's podcast. We discussed that. We don't know, but obviously it helps to an extent. Obviously, if you're dealing with light bantam weights compared to heavyweight, heavyweight's going to fuck you up, absolutely. But when it comes to, say, for example, you had two middleweight fighters, and one of them, for example, Yoel Romero. He's huge. Okay, now Yoel Romero he's not a good example, because he's got stamina for days. He's a wrestler. But if you have someone with a similar build, who hasn't put that much effort into his development as far as stamina is concerned, because they're not a wrestler, but they come from weightlifting, or they spend too much time concentrating on that. It takes a lot of blood, a lot of oxygen, a lot of all of the bits of chemistry that require your body to function. It requires a lot more from your heart to get that
Dude,
right.
just to keep your hands up. Like, if you think about, if you have massive biceps and massive triceps and big heavy arms, like, we're talking on marginal and minuscule scales here, but just to keep your hands up, and versus somebody who is athletically tuned to what they're doing and what they're competing in. Those small margins make a difference. Like,
at the highest levels they do, but also that's why you'll have guys doing bench pressing, because that bench press might be the difference between a more powerful punch or not. So it very much depends on what they're looking to achieve, but a good fighter would never go out of their way to create an aesthetic look, because the more muscle you have, the more oxygen you're going to burn, the more quickly you're going to get tired.
And you'll be fatigued. So that's what I also wanted to say. The guys who are aesthetically built within the UFC that's genetic.
Yeah, it's genetic.
Their body builds like that naturally, and they're lucky. Like someone like Tyron Woodley, the man is built for a magazine cover. But
Craig's favorite.
The man is good. It's a bit he hasn't won in a while.
Look at Khabib. He looks like he's got a dad bod. You know what I mean?
I mean, look at Nate Diaz. That's a homeless fucking.
But that's proof of point, right? That's case in point. If you look at, for example, Izzy versus Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa is
he's an Adonis,
Playboy cover model type physique. Do you know what I mean? Whereas Izzy's, like, everyone always hates on him and tunes him shit about being skinny for his size and for his weight. I mean, he's tall and he's lanky and he's, somewhat skinnier than the classic physique at middleweight, but he ruined Costa.
But it might be the wine that Costa's drinking.
Did you hear that?
Fuck me, mate. Jeez, like
Proper
dude,
12.
fuck off. But yeah, if you guys want to go read a little bit more about what we're talking about, jump onto the Strictly Fighters blog at strictlyfighters.com. We have a lot of the point of views on functional strength versus training to look better or whatever it may be. There's a few things on there for any kinds of amateurs looking to learn new techniques, etc. How to choose the fight form that you're looking to grow in. So go check it out, strictlyfighters.com. And you can also check out, there's some merch that we dropped on there. Mentioned that in the last podcast. But
we'll mention it in every podcast, so look forward to that.
Hopefully mine should arrive for the next episode. So we'll see.
Ooh, pressure's on.
Yeah, pressure's on. We'll make sure. I just got to fix my address. But anyway.
So it happens
doesn't
in
exist.
Dubai. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's roll this on to the next topic that I want to bring up. And it's dealing with injuries in MMA. So fighting is fighting, right? It's a brutal, it's a hectic thing. It's not
it's not
it's
fucking
a contact
cricket,
sport.
mate.
One of the common sayings in my gym that you'll hear people when the going gets tough and when we're doing hectic conditioning or when we're doing heavy sparring is that and it's counterintuitive and I would never repeat it, but they say this is not ballet, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I think ballet, the rigors of training in ballet are pretty much probably just as hectic as martial arts.
Mate, I'm married to a dancer. Go watch how much their feet bleed and
so I don't think it's a great expression or a great comparison, but you get, from a mainstream perspective, you get what they're saying. Now, the point I'm making is you get injured, you get hurt and you get injured in martial arts when you train, especially if you're training full contact or martial arts that engage in full contact sparring. One of the things that I'm currently learning how to do is to train through injury. Now, what I used to do, and a quick history of why I used to do it is I'm a very injury prone person. When I was in high school and university, I basically did every single sport that I could think of. I played so much sport. I was in the gym. I was lifting really heavy weights and my body just didn't kind of keep up and develop with all of the physical activity that I was doing. So I developed some pretty serious injuries, injuries that would put me out for 6 to 9 to 12 months at a time. Because of that, and at the time I wouldn't treat them correctly. So I would just get back to playing or doing whatever I was doing as quickly as possible without doing the proper rehab, without going through the proper treatment. And that obviously has a long-term knock-on effect. Then once that started happening to me and I found myself sitting out of the sports that I love for 6 months at a time, I got really good at learning how to nurse, to treat, and to fully rehab injuries, right? And what that meant for me was a complete break from the sport that I was doing, a deep dive into the theory and the knowledge behind what I needed to do, and then a demonic-like commitment to doing that every single day and getting the treatment that I needed, doing the rehab and the exercises that I needed to do, until I got to a point where I was almost 98% confident that, okay, I'm ready to go back and ease myself into training again. Now, with martial arts, that's a different story because you're always injured. There is always a small niggling injury or something slightly more serious, or
you're
a
also
big
getting
injury.
fucked up.
But there's a difference between getting hurt and kind of bruises and cuts and
injuries. Something. Just sorry to interrupt you, Jay. So, in martial arts, there's a big difference between being injured and being hurt. If you're injured, that's more serious. If you're hurt,
you're incapacitated. If you're injured, there's things that you can't do or can't do to the full extent that you used to be able to do.
Yeah. For example, my back is killing me right now, but I'm going to go to training. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to let this bug me, but also I know how to train because I know how to train to avoid hurting it more, and to allow it to recover while I'm training. So it's almost like active healing.
So
and that's.
I've got a question for you guys who get injured. I'm not one of those people. So, do you take pain medication before training or anything like that? Because so from the perspective of my wife, who is a professional dancer, she refuses to take pain medication because she dances with injuries. So to if you take that pain away, you don't understand. She doesn't know when she's pushed it too far and
Exactly.
completely ruins it further.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I did the same thing. So I had a pretty bad injury. I twisted my knee getting out of a heel hook. It was a stupid escape. It was my fault. Almost basically ripped the tendons apart in my knee. But instead of doing that, so in your knee, your bones have got grooves, and your tendons in your tendons in your leg sort of sit in the groove, in sort of a half circle groove in your knee. And if you move your body in a certain way, sometimes that tendon can bounce out and bounce back in. That process is fucking painful. But you can still train with it. It's not a permanent injury. It's just it hurts a shitload. The problem is I took pain pills. I never normally do this, but I wanted to keep training because I had a competition coming up. Took pain pills, just trained. I thought, well, it's a good session. Didn't feel much pain. The next day it was killing me. I was out for 2 weeks because I had compounded that injury. That's it.
And I think that forms part of learning to manage yourself training through injury. So like I say, that's what I used to do was go through a full healing and rehabilitation process. But what I found now training in boxing is that I can't, because I would never train if I had to think that way. So in full contact martial arts, where you always kind of have a small niggle here or a little injury there or something even a little bit more serious, but you have to learn how to manage yourself to train through that. And I'm not necessarily advocating for or denying the effectiveness of using painkillers to help with that process. I think that might be quite an individual thing, actually. But what I found is I've almost had to go through a mindset shift in evolution where I treat injuries now with a state of semi-realism, where I accept that I've been injured and I understand that I've been injured and that I need to now manage this injury and try not to exacerbate it further. But I also, the other 50% of my mindset is, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to do what I need to do. I'm still going to go to training every night. It's a mental toughness that I've had to develop and that I'm starting to develop and that I'm seeing very good results with, because there is a huge effect that stems from the way that you mentally treat your injuries in terms of how it translates into your actual physical healing, right? What used to happen with me is I would go into a crippling, debilitating, spiraling depression and wallowing in self-pity when I got injured.
You through one of those. It's not fun.
You've nursed me through a few, let's be honest. And you know, that what I would find now that I've seen the other side is it would prolong my injury. My mental state had a direct effect on the physical capability of my body to heal. Now, having to, through no other choice, having to develop a mental toughness where, okay, I got injured, both my hands, I've sprained both my thumbs and got a whole bunch of knuckle injuries from boxing over the past couple of months. But I wrap the hands, I ice them between every session, I treat them and I do what I can, but I also don't fully accept the injury. So I'm kind of going to training with almost in a state of semi-denial. And I find that helps build mental toughness and build positivity towards it, that it's not the be all and end all, that my life hasn't come crashing down, that I'm never going to achieve my competitive goals in boxing. And for me, it's a real thing. People talk about it all the time, but your mental state has a direct effect on your ability to physically heal.
Definitely.
My last point on this before I hand it over to you guys, if you've got further points on this, there's a reference from an MMA show on Netflix called Kingdom. I've spoken to you guys about this in the last episode. Go watch the show. It's fucking epic. The main protagonist, who's actually played by Frank Grillo, he's also quite a famous martial artist. He is in the character of Alvi King Kulina, and in one of the episodes, he's sitting on the couch in his doctor's room, and he's just gone through some pretty hectic physical injuries and some physical health problems. Yet he has a fight coming up that he has to train for. And his doctor's speaking to him about it and potentially, telling him about or asking him to potentially consider not training and consider pulling out of the fight. And he says, "Do I feel good? No. But you're only as sick as you think you are. You start thinking about your pain, and then your mind slips. And then you don't know if you're hurt, or you just think that you're hurt. You become weak. You start identifying with frailty. And then before you fucking know it, you are a sick guy."
So let me explain something. That's really interesting. In our school, in our jiu-jitsu academy, if you start talking about your injury, everyone else will start talking about their injuries. Next class you come back, there'll be fewer people there. It's crazy. So one of the sort of customs, or maybe one of the rules, sort of unspoken rules in our gym, is that when you are injured, you don't talk about it much. I mean, you can mention it, but don't make a thing out of it. It's just a niggle. Get over it. You're fighting. You're supposed to be hurt. It's normal. But if you start acknowledging your pain and your injuries and this and that, everyone else will identify with you. They'll be like, well, I've also got this thing in my back. I've got this thing in my ankle, my back, my shoulder, my neck. So it's a very real thing. Identifying pain, other people will identify it as well. So I just wanted to also talk about the painful thing, because you said it was an individual thing. It's very much not an individual thing. And
that was a hypothesis.
Okay, so I'll explain why. And it's an important thing, though. When you're training with an injury, it's important to be cognizant of it, and you forget about it. If you've taken a pain pill, you forget about the pain because the pain's not there anymore. So you will train as if that injury doesn't exist, and then you'll compound it. You'll compound that injury. If you are conscious of that injury throughout your training session, you will do what you can to compensate for that. So, for example, when my right knee was fucked, I would play in half guard, which means essentially lying on my right-hand side, my right leg, the injured leg, lying between my training partner's leg, and only using my left leg for defense. That's what I would do. And I could do this throughout the whole training session because I know that my right leg is fucked if I don't do this, and I can feel the pain throughout the session. But again, martial arts isn't just about being physically more dominant; it's mentally as well. And this comes down to even in MMA fights. It's the guy who's mentally prepared that's going to beat their opponent in the fifth round. It's just going to be that way. So mental toughness is huge. And dealing with injury while training martial arts, I think is a very important part of that journey. If you don't know how to deal with pain and still keep going, even if it's just a semi contact sparring session, you're not going to be able to deal with a real life situation when someone's kicked you in the leg and you're starting to feel the pain, because now you've got an injury and not an injury, but you've got something that's hurt. You're more conscious about it, and you don't know how to train or how to deal with it in a fight situation because you've never really trained with pain in a fight situation if you're always taking pain pills while training. So two very important reasons why you wouldn't want to take pain pills before training.
So all I'm hearing from you fuckers is you don't have Mr. Miyagi in your corner going,
I do it myself.
So I've got a question for you guys. So we probably have a few non-fighters and people getting into fighting and or into some form of martial art. So Jay's coming from a karate, bless me. How's it? Yeah, some kind of ninjutsu with a backflip and a tuck, and some diving, and now getting into boxing. And then Sean's got the karate, Muay Thai, BJJ, Jiu-Jitsu. How's it, Joel? So
I don't like your predisposed bias towards traditional martial arts.
He just offended an entire community there.
I'm not worried about that. But anyway, what I wanted to find out is, from your experience in each of these martial arts, which has shown a tendency to drive towards a more injury-prone sport, versus hurt. So boxing, you're going to get fucked up hurt every time. Same thing with Muay Thai. You're going to get kicked and hit in the face properly. Whereas with jiu-jitsu, it's more of a hold. You are going to get hurt if you don't tap out in some way and move on to the next session. So which are you looking at if you're planning on joining the sport? Which one are you looking at getting more injured, or which one are you going to get more beat up?
Yeah, so it's a difficult one because injuries in most cases. Okay, so straightforward answer: jiu-jitsu is more injury prone because remember, you're dealing with joints, you're dealing with tendons, you're dealing with a whole bunch of things that can get hurt. With Muay Thai, with boxing, it's contact and you get hits, but with boxing,
More
it's more
cuts
long.
and bruises.
It's yeah, and it's more long-term mental issues that you're going to be experiencing as far as injuries, CTE, things like that.
It's the American football problem, right? The bashing helmets and all that shit. Yeah,
exactly. So jiu-jitsu, you are definitely more prone to being injured, but and it's important to point this out, you're more likely to be injured because you did something wrong, not because your opponent did something wrong. Usually if you're being injured in jiu-jitsu, like for example, when I hurt my knee. Okay, so by the way, whenever I get injured, it's always my fault. Always in the gym, whether it's not tapping to an arm bar, whether it's not, for example, when I stuffed up my knee, it was because I twisted it while trying to escape. It was my own fault. So these are career-ending injuries because, for example, not career-ending, I mean, it would put me out for 6 months to a year just because I twisted my knee wrong. So the injuries that you are likely to get in jiu-jitsu are more life-altering, but the martial arts is going to introduce those sorts of injuries and hurts, if lack of a better term, because remember the martial art that you're training is to hurt people severely.
So what you're saying is injuries are self-inflicted and hurt is being inflicted.
Yeah, essentially.
So someone's going to hurt you versus I'm going to be long-term injured. I'm doing that to myself.
Yeah, in most cases in jiu-jitsu.
An interesting concept.
Where the striking sports, I don't know, Jay, what do you think? I guess it is more to do with your opponents not stopping when they should, or just being too rough.
Yeah, I found that when I trained karate, which I did for over 10 years, it's a semi-contact sport. It's point fighting from a kumite perspective. So in terms of getting hurt in karate when you're sparring and even when you're competing, you don't really get hurt. From an injury perspective, I found that I went through quite a few injuries, nothing too serious, but quite a few injuries because I didn't do functional training. That was not part of the karate curriculum. I would do weightlifting that was completely irrelevant to karate, and then I would train in karate and I would experience injuries because I hadn't conditioned myself to for the rigors of, for example, performing 3-minute long katas 50 times a day when I'm training or when I'm, you know what I mean?
You look pretty, yeah.
Oh yeah, go. Did you see my comment on your?
Yes.
Okay, good, because you hadn't responded and I just wondered why. So if anyone's wondering why,
I'm
go check it out in the group.
He's still formulating a comeback. Come on, Craig.
All right, well you keep going, mate.
Yeah.
Anyway, when it comes to boxing, what I find is that from a physical perspective, in terms of my stamina and my toughness and my ability to carry on training, I am miles ahead of when I was competing and training in karate, because of the functional training and the functional fitness that I've managed to build up, because it's a part of the curriculum of boxing. From a hurt perspective, mate, I get absolutely fucked up every time that I go into that gym. Right? Obviously, I'm sparring on average guys who are 20 to 25 kilograms heavier than me every time, and I don't mind that because it's a good way to learn. But yes, from a physical injury perspective, by virtue of participating in the physicality of the sport, I find that to be less than when I was training in karate. But from an injury stemming from participating in the sport, probably more. So like I said, I have pretty mild to average injuries in both hands that would put me out for a week at a time, maybe 2 weeks, because it's boxing. And, even though I think we're wearing 14 ounce gloves. If you catch a thumb wrong, when you're on the inside and you're throwing an uppercut or a hook, and that hook's on something or somebody's arm or whatever, and your thumb hyperextends back 90 degrees, that's sore, and it's going to put you out for a while. So there are injuries from boxing. I cracked my ribs from taking a punch to the body. That's 6 weeks out, basically being able to do absolutely nothing, because there's not much you can do to accelerate that healing process.
It's dangerous to train like that because it can pierce your lung.
Yeah. So I think, it depends amongst even different stand-up arts. I would imagine in Muay Thai, both your injuries and your level of hurt are accelerated tenfold compared to boxing, compared to karate, compared to semi-contact sports, because there's elbows, there's knees. The sparring is of a much heavier and more intense nature than the other sports that we've spoken about. So
crazy thing is, and you'll I don't know if you've experienced this yet, or you will eventually. You start enjoying the pain of hurt, not injuries. Injuries suck. You start enjoying it because
it's lekker.
It's lekker.
Yeah, but I mean,
the reason is
any of you guys who have been in a fight from a bar, you get out there with your mates, be like, fuck yeah. Like,
it's the best feeling in the world. It means you did something. It means you did something. I promise you, with lockdown, being comfortable, being injury-free, being pain-free, it's the weirdest feeling for me.
It's boring.
It's boring because it means you're not doing anything. You're not being constructive in any way apart from sitting on your bed and playing PlayStation. You know what I mean?
That's the difference.
Primal.
That's the essential difference, Craig, between being injured and getting hurt. Right? You get hurt in a fight. It sucks, like it's sore, and you're in pain, but it's a lacquer kind of pain. And if for our first time listeners, if you don't know what lacquer means, it's a South African slang term. Go back to the end of our episode 1 and you'll find out exactly what that means. Whereas in injury, that's a different kind of that's not lacquer, right? That's a pain where you realize that you can't train, or you can't train as hard, and there's something serious to deal with, and that's shit. And that's that's probably the essential difference between being injured and getting hurt.
Yeah, because injury also takes you out of that space that you're enjoying. So
exactly.
I get that.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. I like I say, I enjoy the pain. It's a weird thing to say, but when I'm in pain, I know I'm doing something constructive. I'm getting better at something.
I think that applies to any kind of training. I mean, for me, someone who lifts weights in a gym, there is no better feeling than leaving the gym knowing that everything hurts. There's except for leg day. Fuck me, that's a horrible pain.
Don't skip leg day.
Yeah, but that's a genuinely horrible pain. That's not something you enjoy. But
Do you know what I enjoy?
Fuck off.
Smooth whiskey.
God,
smooth whiskey with hints of vanilla, honey, and toasted wood.
That's what better fucking pay us.
She's like, if he doesn't, Jay will probably end up sucking him off. So,
all right, boys.
With pleasure.
Hype. UFC 259, 3 title fights coming up this weekend. Can you even wait for it?
I'm giddy.
I've got a story. Okay.
Tell me.
So Jan, and you say his name Blachowicz, by the way. That's how you say it? Yeah, Blachowicz.
Okay.
Blow who's what?
Yeah, he's Polish. So an interesting story, and apparently
I'm going to call him Jan.
His name's actually Yannick.
No, fuck off, man. He's Jan.
So
carry on.
Jan. Okay, that's fine. A story that he's told in a few places, and I think he told it on Ariel Helwani's show as well, is the story of him finding someone hanging in a forest. Have you heard that?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
Interesting
is
thing.
Did Jake? What's that fucking idiot's name?
No, man. No.
Okay.
So
Craig, calm down.
Blachowicz, he was in his home country, and he wanted to go out for a walk with his dog. And obviously, being a famous person, he can't be walking around in public areas, and like anyone else, he's going to go and take a walk in nature. So he did. He took a walk in the forest, and he came across a body hanging from a tree. True story. And called the cops, as you would normally do. Cops came. He gave his statement. He said, "This is where I found him," all the rest of the things you'd normally do. And the cop tells him, "You need to take this rope with you." It's like, "What are you talking about?" He's, "Take the rope with you. It's sort of tradition. It's a weird custom almost." So he gave him the rope. He cut the rope from the tree, gave it to him. Jan still has that rope. He
I saw
rubs it.
that post.
He touches it before every fight for good luck.
That makes a man
So-
scary. So now
Yeah.
now I've got a huge question for you. How often must that happen to become a custom? How often do you find dead people to be like, yeah,
in the
this
Polish
is
woods.
yeah, this
In the
is a
Polish woods.
tradition. You go to the woods, you find dead people, we give you a rope.
I don't know, but it's interesting though. I mean, yeah, it was a really interesting story when I heard it. I thought,
I'd be stressed. The Oak's
Yeah, it
rubbing
kinda
some kind of dead person's rope every time he comes into the ring.
That's weird, man. He should have his nickname should be the Hangman, not Dan Hooker.
Yeah.
Jeez, like
man, Dan Hook is the best. Have you seen his social media since his loss recently?
All I've seen is that he was away from his wife and kid for like 6 straight weeks
Oh
or something.
yeah, it's crazy. I don't even think he's back with him yet.
Yeah.
So he's got the best attitude. He's like, "Dude, I've already got a shit record. I don't mind losing another one. It just means I can just keep fighting. It doesn't matter." I love it, dude. He's got the best attitude.
talk about doing it for
Do you see
love.
that though a lot, right? When you see undefeated fighters lose their first fight, and then that kind of that veil of being what omnipotent, of being invincible is it drops, and then you kind of see them loosen up a lot and just they just fight. They just they fight because they love to fight. Whereas like if you're an undefeated fighter, okay, Khabib maybe aside, he doesn't seem to feel any pressure or even think about or consider his record, but other fighters do. And once they lose that first fight, I see a big change in attitude in all of them.
If you want to use a prime example, you're talking about someone like AJ, and then Joshua. Like literally, I mean, he's always been pretty down to earth as a fighter, but he's gotten to the point now. I just want to fight. Bring anyone, let's just fight. I put the.
It's almost
contract and let's
cathartic,
go.
isn't it?
Yeah,
It almost kind of
gotten rid
releases
of
the
it.
pressure. Yeah. You got the monkey
I mean,
off your back.
Blachowicz,
The proverbial monkey.
Blachowicz's record is what, 10-5. He hasn't got the best record, but he's the UFC champ.
But
I mean,
it also makes him dangerous. So that
It does. He's got something to lose now. I mean, he's champ. But I mean, when was it? 2007 to 2020, he lost most of his matches.
he was 2-4. He was 2-4. He almost got
He had a
removed
big
from
resurgence.
the UFC.
Yeah, he almost got kicked, and he came back. He had nothing to lose. Well,
Yeah,
I
He had a
think
big resurgence.
J.K. Rowling. I'm going to be quoting Harry Potter's author. She said,
Me.
"The best place to build is from rock bottom, because it's a solid foundation." It's a really cool quote. I always use
It is. It's strong. It's strong.
So this is an interesting one. So I wanted to go into that fight specifically because once again, Sean, if you're putting your money behind Izzy, it's questionable to your allegiance to the BJJ world.
Okay, so I'm not easy. I'm a fan of both. Listen,
Gents, let me contextualize this for people who aren't necessarily watching. So Israel Adesanya is a perfect example of a world-class striker with a very solid takedown defense that has dominated MMA. Quick stat, he has an 86% takedown defense. So he comes from a kickboxing record. His kickboxing record is phenomenal. He is something like 76-2 or something to that effect in professional kickboxing before he transitioned to MMA. And he's now unbeaten in MMA. I think his record is somewhere around 20-0. Absolutely stormed through the middleweight division in the UFC and is now moving up to the light heavyweight division to challenge the light heavyweight champion.
And he's not putting on any weight for it, which is crazy.
Yeah, he's coming in 12 pounds under.
Yeah, he's fighting with. They've opted to essentially strategize and work on his speed and his, because that's what he's been doing really, really well at is using his speed and his agility. And he's the style bender. He needs style, and he's not going to be very stylish 20 kgs heavier just to make weight. It's
This is a massive risk.
Wait, this brings me back to last week's podcast. Is once again, you can go to the strictlyfighters.com podcast to check, the blog to check out where we talk about weight cutting and how that plays a role in these fights. But I mentioned that a fighter will come into a ring. If he comes in and he's walking around weight and he's training as hard as he can and not having to go through that stress of cutting, why would you put your body through that? And he's not putting his body through any kind of additional stress of building extra muscle, like you said earlier, Sean, with that's going to send extra oxygen.
Let's be fair though. Light heavyweight and heavyweight, they very rarely lose weight. They very rarely do weight cuts. These guys at this point, they will fight at their natural weight most of the time because they're just too big to try and weight cut.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Is he's going at his natural weight?
Yeah, Israel hasn't over the last 2 months or so bulked up to get to the threshold of light heavyweight, which is 205 pounds, right? He's saying he walks around at around 198 pounds, but is planning on coming into the fight at around 193 pounds, which, like Craig says, is what, 12 pounds below the threshold, which is unusual. You won't often see a fighter going up a weight class and not trying to reach the threshold, the upper threshold of that weight class before they move into the fight. And for me, right, he's built an incredible record. He's one of the hype men in the UFC. He's one of the stars of the UFC. And this is a massive risk for his legacy, right? He's going up. He's got big enough balls to walk into the unknown against a light heavyweight champion with a middleweight frame, right?
It doesn't really affect it to a certain extent. I don't think it affects his legacy. So yes, if he wins, it creates a monster legacy. If he loses, he goes back to his normal body weight and he holds that title in his own weight division.
Doesn't matter. He won't be a champ. He won't join the echelons. He won't join the echelons of the double champs. He will have lost to what some might consider a pretty average light heavyweight champion in terms of being the full package. And he's talking about beating John Jones. And then, you know what I mean? If you can't beat Jan
Jan.
But you're speaking about John Jones, speaking about beating the greatest of all time. Of course, it damages his legacy in a big way. Yes, not necessarily in the middleweight division, but it will also be his first loss in mixed martial arts. It's massive. It's a huge risk. I admire him for it. I admire him for it.
Yeah, I mean, I admire him as well to move up and fight a guy like I mean, he's Blachowicz is a black belt, dude. BJJ black belt, and Izzy at the moment is he's a purple belt. He's just turned purple,
and we haven't seen the extent of Izzy's ground game because the simple fact is that he's never really had to use it. Right? 86% takedown defense. I haven't seen him train in BJJ. No,
he trains with Atos. So the guys over there, man, he was involved in an altercation with Gordon Ryan this last week. Gordon Ryan slapped him, essentially the head coach of Atos. And but yeah, Izzy at the moment is training with the guys at Atos, they are killers, dude. These guys are killers. So again, whether or not the grappling is going to come into play in this fight, I hope it does, because Blachowicz's only real chance in this fight is not on the feet. It's using his weight, using his pressure, and using his black belt. I think that's going to be his answer to winning this fight.
I would tend to agree with you, even though he's an amazing striker, right? Blachowicz is not a slouch on the feet.
I mean, he was a kickboxer as well.
Yeah, he that Polish power is real. He's got one punch knockout power for sure. And in addition to that, he's very adept in the pocket, and he's a bigger, larger, potentially stronger man. The other thing is he doesn't have the massive reach advantage that he usually has over middleweight frames in this fight. I think he's only got a 2 to 4 inch reach advantage. So he's not going to enjoy the comfortability of being able to manage range and distance and timing the way he's used to at middleweight. So I think this is a great matchup. I think there are a lot of variables in this fight that play a little bit out of Izzy's hands. Also, it's in a smaller octagon. So, again, that kind of changes things a little bit with the longest, tallest striker.
I've got a question for you
Yeah.
guys. I watched an interview just now with Izzy, and
Guys, by the way, just now in South African slang means earlier, not just.
Yeah, yeah. It could be anything from 2 minutes ago to 10 minutes ago to half an hour ago
last
to about
year.
2 hours ago.
No,
Just
no,
now is
because now is about 2 to 5 minutes ago.
Okay, fair enough.
Oh,
So
just now is anything from 10 minutes onwards.
okay, so
It's just making arbitrary.
fair enough. So I watched this interview, and they asked him, so where does he see it going, right? And he sees there being two avenues to victory. He won't mention one because he thinks he can end it in the first round with that avenue, so he won't talk about it. And the second one, he sees it being like the Whitaker fight of Jan coming at him, and he will just end it.
Yeah.
And he thinks that'll end it in about the second round. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention was he said there is a third outcome. I could lose this. Who knows? I could. Now, that mindset for me, I've never seen with someone like Conor. I've never seen with like the elite mentalities, the champs have never ever spoken about themselves losing before a fight even happened.
It's important.
So
I think it's part of his I think it's part of his compositional makeup as a personality though. If I had to put money on it, I would put big money on the fact that there is not a doubt in this man's mind that he is going into this fight and he's going to win this fight. I think it's more, I guess, part of his makeup as a personality to out of the blue put something out like that out there. I think he's not oblivious to the fact. He's a very smart human being.
Yeah.
It's not like he believes that he absolutely can never lose, but I don't think it's a case of him genuinely considering as a third option that, hey, I could lose this fight. It's more a charm offensive, maybe a little bit of mind game type thing that he's playing.
It's more acknowledging evidence. I mean, Vlahovic, he's a champ at this point at light heavyweight. So to say that you're just going to run through the light heavyweight champ, it's a bit ignorant. It's a bit naive to think that, and you wouldn't just say that out loud. So I think that's reasonable saying I could lose. There's a possibility. By the way, the guy's name is Andre Galvao. Sorry, not that it means anything to you guys, but it was bugging me. The head coach of.
Rewind about 4 minutes, and then you'll see what Sean's talking about. So,
okay, so the Craig, you go first. What's your prediction?
I love Izzy. I believe he deserves to be a double champ. And I believe that he embodies the fact that I've been talking about the weight cuts and the ability to fight at your prime, at your walk around weight and your training weight. And I believe if he goes in with that, he's going in at his prime, and he's not going to be tired or anything. I think he'll walk. I think he'll take it. And I think I don't think he's getting a knockout before the fourth round.
So you're saying KO, TKO, fourth round?
Yeah.
Sean?
I don't think Vlahovic is going to submit him. Even a new purple belt isn't going to have too much of an issue defending against a black belt in this situation when they're sweating, especially with him having trained with. Okay, I keep saying this, the Atos crew. It's difficult to emphasize how much this means for someone. These guys are no-gi specialists. They only train for this sort of context. So defending, especially with the types of guys he's been training with, defending against submissions against someone like Bro is going to be too much of an issue for him. So I think he's pretty confident on the ground. The only way he's going to get him, Vlahovic is going to get him, is through pressure on the ground and getting sort of TK on the ground. Otherwise, I think Addy will take it, and it's going to be a lot in the fourth round. I think maybe I would say Izzy takes it in the beginning of the third round, probably KO, proper KO, no TKO.
If I had to hazard a guess, I would imagine a 5-round war of attrition with Israel Adesanya.
I wouldn't mind that at all.
With Izzy outstriking Jan in the end, and taking a unanimous decision win.
Yeah, in this fight, I almost don't think I didn't even consider. It's a very, very high possibility. Two kickboxing specialists who come from that background, both very good grapplers, so they're very, very balanced in that aspect. So yeah, you might be right. They might just pull it out and do the whole 5 rounds. What about Nunes? We haven't talked about her.
Yeah,
She's defending her belts.
That's the next one.
Yeah, so Amanda Nunes versus Megan Anderson, Aussie, oi, 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 g'day, mate, how you going? Going good, mate. Megan Anderson, she is a featherweight. She doesn't have the most impressive record in the UFC, but she does hold the record for the most fights at featherweight in the female division with 5. She is a former Invicta FC featherweight champion. For those who don't know, Invicta Fighting Championship is a US-based MMA promotion for women only. She spent 2.5 years in the Aussie military. She's 6 foot tall. She's big. She's strong. So she's a dark horse in this fight. I haven't watched a lot of her, if I'm honest, but I've never seen anyone that comes close to Amanda.
Yeah, I was just about to say, Nunes is a different animal, mate. It's
yeah. What Nunes did to Cyborg.
Yeah, mind blowing.
If you can do that, I don't really see any other contenders, to be honest. I've tried researching and looking into it and seeing who kind of comes close with technique or strength. Nunes is just another planet. But
she is. She's head and shoulders, isn't she?
But when what's her name? That
Dude, Amanda Nunes would take out half, if not all, of the men's bantamweight and flyweight division.
Yes,
I'll give you that.
Massive
dude.
claim.
I would give you that, but
it's a huge claim.
I don't know.
We're getting in.
She's an absolute monster.
Now we're getting into the Fox discussion of I can't remember her name now, but something Fox, who went from female division, from the male division to the female division, and started cracking
Ellen
skulls.
Fox.
So yeah, I don't know, when you're talking about that kind of experience, like, yes, she is a beast, but
that's a debate for another day.
Yes,
let's shelve that. Let's table that. But we'll definitely talk about that because it's an interesting one.
Yeah. And
so
then we've got another Jan.
Yeah. Before we get there, Craig, what's your prediction? Amanda Nunes, Megan Anderson.
First to second round. Let's go second round. Nunes takes it. TK.
What, KO?
KO. Yeah, KO. I think
Sean?
she's gonna sleep her.
Oh yeah, Nunes KO one time, probably second round. I'd give her the first round just to get the fit. And then
what she likes to do. Yeah, agreed. I'm gonna side with you boys on that one. And then the third event, or the third main event of that evening is Peter Yan versus Aljamain Sterling. In the bantamweight division, this would be Sean's division in MMA, by the way. And again, here we have another classic case of a striker versus a grappler. Peter Yan comes from a boxing background. His boxing is out of this world. If you think about an archetypal example of somebody with a boxing base coming into MMA, he's your guy. Again, another world-class elite striker with a solid takedown defense, right? He's got an 87% takedown defense rate. And guys, Sean, if Izzy and Peter Yan win on the weekend, we need to revisit our conversation and your sentiments around the striking versus grappling debate, where, you know, we speak about a world-class striker with solid takedown defense dominating mixed martial arts fights, because these are two classic cases. Granted, Blachowicz is, you know, he's a BJJ black belt. He's a solid wrestler. He's a bigger, stronger guy. He is probably has more credentials as a grappler, but isn't an archetypal kind of Damian Maia BJJ absolute expert type thing. But they're both good cases of a stand-up striker versus more of a grappler. So
if that happens, the interesting conversation, and you're going to inflate Sean's head here a little bit, is yes, the BJJ guys would have lost, but that would show how good Khabib really is for beating one of the best strikers in the game of Connor, being a jiu-jitsu artist or a
Guys,
wrestler.
Wrestler.
it comes
Sorry.
down to how well it comes down to how well the apply their game. Be a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but if you can't get the guy to the ground, your tool set is useless. Yeah, sorry, my internet connection's a bit stable, guys.
Yeah. Fuck me, Sean. Get it
It's fine.
together.
Craig, what's your prediction?
That's a tough one. I'm gonna go for the American. They're the underdog,
Craig,
I guess.
please.
I don't know.
Please,
I haven't looked into this enough. I don't know them well enough.
It's weird how I don't know why. Like Aljamain is American, right? But he
Yeah.
carries around a Jamaican flag with him. I think there must be some heritage, or maybe his parents are Jamaican or something.
What a wanker. So I don't know, dude. I honestly I don't know either well enough.
You're a strange human being, by the way.
I-
Strange human being.
I'm struggling to decide who. I mean, I'll
You're
go.
sounding worse than Sean, and he's got a bad internet connection. Okay.
I'll go with Sterling third round, because if he's gonna go for the grappling part, so he's gonna do his best to get it to ground. So I'd say Sterling third round.
He's a great submission artist. He's got some fantastic submissions, and his transitions in the clinch through to the ground are, they're super impressive. So Craig is going for a third round submission by Aljamain. Okay, Sean, short and sweet.
Yeah, one word.
Fourth round.
We didn't even get the one word. Try again.
Fuck. Aljamain.
Oh, this is terrible. Okay, I'm going to cap it off. I think that I'm gonna go against the grain and say that Pedion is going to knock him out second round. We'll when it's all said and done, we'll be back next week to revisit our predictions and talk about this absolute blockbuster of a card coming up. If you don't watch MMA or UFC, this is the perfect weekend, the perfect introduction for you to have a good little gawk and get yourself into it, because it's going to be explosive. Everyone, enjoy the fights. To all of our listeners and watchers and viewers around the world, thank you for tuning in for another episode, and we will catch you on the flip side, fam.